This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
At 3 minutes past 7 o'clock, good morning and how are you doing? This is The Situation Room, broadcasting in Nairobi, 94.4. We're in Mombasa on 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, Eldoret, 96.7, Nyeri, 90.9, and Malindi, 97.7. Live streaming on our digital platforms, www.spicefm.co.ke, SpiceFM.ke on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Now, we have a guest in the studio this morning that we've been telling you about, and this is the Speaker of the Senate, Kenneth Lusaka. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you.
And asante sana for joining us.
Asante.
You have a very busy schedule shortly when you when you reconvene.
Yes.
So it's good that we have you now before you become completely busy.
Right.
Of course, you're always busy. There's a lot of work that you've been doing in the Senate. First of all, congratulations for joining the Senate and becoming the second Speaker of the Senate under this dispensation. You came in and faced a Senate that had served 4 years, the first term, and now you're spearheading the leadership of the Senate in the second term. You had also served as a governor, and you worked as governor for an entire term. So you know these things about Senate and the role of the Senate in protecting devolution, and that's what is said in the Constitution. So I'm going to just go straight into it. However, is the Senate relevant?
Yeah, of course. First, thank you very much for hosting me. The creation of the Senate, one, was not an accident. This was a decision made by Kenyans, and it was the understanding that there needed to be an institution to protect devolution. Because remember, Kenya has had a Senate. This is not the first time we're having a Senate. We had a Senate in 1963, after independence, to around 1966. And it was abolished, and that also went with Majimbo. Remember, there was a Majimbo government which had been proposed. So I think for purposes of defending devolution and county governments, and one of the issues that, one of the milestones in the 2010 Constitution was devolution, the chapter on devolution. And remember, it was also very contagious. People were very passionate about it. Yeah. So we needed to have a house that defends that. And that's clearly demonstrated when it comes to allocation of revenue. Remember, we had a stalemate with the National Assembly about the division of revenue that goes to the counties. They wanted a figure that was lower. We wanted a figure that was higher. So you can imagine if there was no institution to talk about, to protect the interests of the counties, then, one day somebody can just wake up and say, to hell with the counties, and then we centralize everything. So I think the Senate is very, very relevant. And of course, I know there have been those perceptions like, what does the Senate do, blah, blah, blah. And that's why we came up with an initiative of what we call the Senate Mashinani, where we take the Senate to the ground, to the counties, for them to see exactly what we do.
You went to, was it Makueni or Kitui?
We were in Uasin Gishu the other year. The first year we went to Uasin Gishu, Eldoret. Then this last year we were in Kitui. Yep. And this year we are yet to agree on where we are going, but we'll make sure we have a regional division on where we go. Our intention is eventually to get to all the counties. So
your job now comes in when it comes to division of revenue, yes. Right? How much money goes to the counties?
Right.
When we have issues about checking what the counties are doing with the finances that they've received, you also come in. But at the tail end, after the Auditor General has audited and come up with a report, and then now we see you summoning governors to come and explain some things. But we don't see you cracking any whip. So there are many people who will say that, yes, the Senate is there, the Senate speaks, but that's all it does. They have absolutely no teeth to bite.
It's good you have raised that question because our role is very clear. Okay, oversight, we must, since we appropriate, we determine the amounts of money that go to the counties. the Senate was also given the oversight role in Article 96, the oversight role. And one of the issues that the Senate has been raising is one, to get funds to assist them oversight, so that we don't just become morticians, looking at
at the very end.
At the very end, when it's dead.
Yeah,
We want to go and see some of the problems that are affecting counties, how the monies are being saved, because there are some cases where the Auditor General comes up and says, money was spent on a project which is non-existent on the ground. So if such things come up, the Senate should be able to move there. We made progress last year, but again, we're just hoping that when we reconvene, we can then be able to get the oversight money so that the Senate can be more active than it is at the moment. As it is now, the Senate, what is it called? CPIC, the Public Accounts and Investment Committee of the Senate, looks at all the reports that are brought in by the Auditor General. All they do is to make recommendations. In fact, these days we have officers from the EACC also sitting in during the deliberations, because the Senate doesn't have the prosecution powers. All they do is to make recommendations to the relevant institutions where, say, money has been misappropriated or money has disappeared. Then they make recommendations to relevant institutions like the EACC, maybe for further investigation, because the Senate is not
an investigative arm or prosecution.
We don't have prosecutorial powers. So then the EACC and the DCI take over those cases, and it's up to them now, once the reports have been finalized and forwarded to them with the recommendations, to look at the recommendations and take action from there. So we have that separation of power. So I can say the Senate has done their bit. And by the way, so far so good, they are up to date in terms of the reports that have already come to the Senate. Unlike in the past, where they've been looking at reports of, for example, 2013, 14, 15, 16, they are now up to date with the reports that have come from the counties, which is very commendable.
Two questions that come out of that, of what you've just said. One, you've talked about, of course, the money for oversight, and this means that you are not facilitated to oversight, which means that, what I was saying, no teeth. Anyway, second question is you've talked about you handing over your reports and recommendations for further investigation to the EACC. So you'll tell us about the number of cases, for example, that you've handed over to EACC.
Right. I think there are over 30 counties that have already, those reports and recommendations have gone to the EACC. I can't remember the exact number. I know there are about 30 that have been forwarded by CPAC to EACC and other organs with recommendations on what needs to be done. Like I said, there are cases where there is need for further investigation. There are cases that need maybe direct prosecution, for example, where it's clear that maybe funds have been misappropriated, and why the governors are summoned, and maybe the law needs to be checked. Because again, having been a governor, and I did raise this when I became the Speaker of the Senate, that the law as it is now, the governors are not the accounting officers. The accounting officers in the counties are chief officers who are appointed by the CECs. The CECs. The CECs are appointed by the governor. Then the CECs, they vet. No, they're not. The CEO, chief officers, also appointed by the governor. In writing, just like the principal secretaries, and I've also served as a permanent secretary before in the midst of livestock development. So you realize that the governor is not an accounting officer. So the person who does the day-to-day procurement, the day-to-day running of the counties is the chief officer. So again, the governor just comes there, and what happens is he reads a report that has been prepared for him. He cannot go beyond that. The people who really know, unless is a governor who micromanages or is hands-on and you want to micromanage everything, you realize that the people who should be held directly accountable are the chief officers and the CCs who run the ministry. So, again, that is an area that maybe needs to be looked at, even the conversations that have been going on. If you want to hold the governor accountable, then we must change the law to make him the accounting officer of the county.
All right. Well, I think just talking about accountability now when it comes, of course, to governorship, I think there are a lot of questions that are being raised then, because now with what we've seen recently when it comes to the impeachment of certain governors, or at least the clamor for that, or for certain, things to come to the fore, then what kind of trust or in terms of buffering for the people can we see? Because then the buck then stops with the Senate when it comes after impeachment? Then, if any kind of convictions will be made, of course, now that lays squarely in your hands as the Senate. Of course, in some cases, Kenyans are baying for blood, and to say something should actually be done. Now, in terms of holding them accountable, this is one of the areas that we see that responsibility will be played out. How do you see that?
You are right, completely right. And I know sometimes what we call we should not allow mobocracy, lynching of people without the Senate, just like a court, goes with the evidence before it. And that's why we have been telling, and even I'm going to Maralal today after here. And what I'm doing is to sensitize the county assemblies that if you want to impeach a governor or you to take action, do a good job. Don't just be in a hurry. Don't be malicious, because sometimes it's more of blackmail. Because you have been refused to a trip or something like that. Then you hold benchmarking. Then you hold the governor at ransom when it becomes a bit difficult. You say we are impeaching him. So I think as a Senate, we want to raise the threshold of the impeachment, because impeachment is really the last process that should happen to a governor. And therefore, that's why when the Taita Taveta one came, Samboja, you realize that you can tell that it was hurriedly done. There were a lot of loopholes, the things are not adding up. And I don't think the Senate is there to be used to rubber stamp bad decisions that have made at that level. So we want the Senate to remain above board, and that's why even when the impeachment process is there, we normally insist that the Senate for that particular area plays not an active role, because then again, most of them also have their own interests. Of course. You may have a senator who is interested in becoming a governor.
Of course.
So we're trying to safeguard those kind of interests, especially when it comes to when a governor is before the Senate or when he's appearing. Like the last Senate, it was very clear where, for example, you had my friend Boni Khalwale being in CPAC and then summoning Oparanya to come. I mean, your fate is already decided, and yet the senator had decided that he was going to run for governorship. So I have tried, using my experience, having come from the other side as a governor and now as a speaker, I've tried my level best to minimize those incidents so that people don't cast aspersions on the Senate when it comes to matters of impeachment and other issues.
But is there conflict of interest? If you'll be honest with us and tell us, is there conflict of interest? Because that's the perception that a lot of people have, that, forget about it. If it gets to the point where we're looking for convictions at the Senate level, and you say these are senators who want to at some point maybe become governors, it will never happen. Because God forbid you be in a situation in the future whereby you are up on the chopping block. You don't want people to sink you either.
No. In fact, on the contrary, I want to defend the Senate. And if you look at the Senate, not to be very sincere, if you look at the senators that we have, most, if not 90%, are people of integrity. People who have served this government in various capacities, and that's what the Senate was meant to be. I've had people saying nyumba ya wazee. It is right. It should be a nyumba ya wazee, where if there are too many hot things in the lower house, the National Assembly, they should come now to the Senate for sober discussion and wisdom. So when you look at people like Mzee Yusuf Haji, you look at Ndwiga, former minister, you look at Wetangula, former minister, Orengo, former minister, Amos Wako, the longest serving Attorney General in Africa or I don't know in the world. So that kind of resource, human resource in the Senate is beyond reproach. And that is where we want the Senate to be. That the Senate should be a house of integrity, of people. When people come to Senate, they should expect justice.
Will there ever be convictions at the Senate level?
Yes. You remember the last Senate, Wambora was impeached, the governor for Embu. Actually, he stayed in the office courtesy of courts. And that's why there must be, and we also don't want to interfere with the works of the court. But again, the courts are the ones who should also now look at what has been put before them and then make their own decision. But if we are working in sync and, everybody, we can see that, this is a problem and blah, 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 we'll do our bit in terms of what, as a Senate, hand over to, if somebody goes to the court, he has a constitutional right to move to court, and the court has its own way of dealing with the matter. It doesn't mean we have not done our bit.
Have you received the impeachment notice for Kiambu?
Yes, I have received, and we reconvening. We are on recess until 11th of February. So we are going to have a special sitting. And, people have been, I even read in the paper saying, the Senate was giving a lifeline to Governor Waititu because of the timelines. One, I think the law did not anticipate that an impeachment motion will come up when we are on recess.
Yeah.
That being the case, our standing order number 30 requires that the leader of majority or minority writes to the speaker with the backing of 15 senators who are, of course, that 15 is our quorum, to seek for a special sitting. But again, that was only, it was anticipated that we will be in session. So while we were out of session, I have had to use my standing order number 1, which gives the speaker discretion now to make a decision on what is not covered in the standing orders. So I've combined standing order number 1 and 30, and the leader of majority has now written and asked that we have a special sitting on 21st, which we shall do. We shall reconvene, have a special sitting, and it's that sitting that we shall decide. There are 2 ways of doing it. One, either we have the allegations heard in plenary, the whole house, or we form a committee of 11 members, 6 from the leader of majority, 5 from the minority side, to look at to investigate the allegations and bring a report for plenary within 10 days. So those are the options. That's a decision that shall be made on 21st when we meet.
What kind of politics are we likely to see here? Well, I know you can't say this because you'll be speculating on your membership. But from out here, the kind of politics that we see is the speculation is that when this matter comes before the Senate, the issue of Tanga Kieleweke BBI is going to take center stage. So even the formation of this, even if you were to form that committee, a special committee, the 6 members from the majority, it will be looked at who is the leader of majority in the Senate. Is Tanga? Does he support the embattled governor? Yes. So how is he going to form this committee? Who is the leader of minority? He's from the BBI. So this is what's going to happen. How do you ensure that politics does not?
When the names, of course, we can't run away from the politics. We are not living in isolation. But it's my prayer, because once the names are proposed, the names will be brought to me. I think will be discussed. They will be brought to me by Friday.
Yeah.
Then we'll have what we call House Business Committee. House Business Committee has both leadership of majority, minority, the whips, and of course the secretariat, and I chair the House Business Committee.
Yeah.
We'll then look at those names and then take the names now. Before the names are accepted, they will have to be approved by the whole House.
Yeah.
So I think that, and I want to be very clear that the House so far has remained solid, has remained united as one.
Non-partisan
on most of these issues. And I know that, the Senate is now going to be on trial, how we manage the issue, because of, we will look at what is before us, not what is in
public domain.
Public domain. We look at whether, because we also don't want to prosecute matters that are in court, because if you bring matters that are in court, then that will be sub judice. So we can be challenged. So we're just hoping that whatever will be brought as the allegations, they will be looked at objectively, so that everybody gets a fair hearing in terms of the position of that they hold.
Since you became Speaker of the Senate, what would you say is the one thing that the Senate, a landmark, something outstanding that the Senate has actually achieved, and something that can be counted to being beneficial to the citizenry of this country?
One is the Senate machinani. That we've taken the Senate to, when we go to, most people may not understand the Senate machinani. When we go, for example, when we're in Kitui, one, we invite the neighboring counties to also come. We hold all our Senate programs just like when we are in Nairobi. The committees meet. Then we have sessions where the locals, the county that we have visited, and the neighboring people and governors come. And we can hear petitions, because one of the issues that comes to Senate is petitions. We also have statements that are sought by Wanainji. So we deal with the issues that come from that particular county. You remember when we were in Eldoret, the issues of maize were very hot, and there was those who were very agitated, and they were talking about, Etangula Murkomen, you have been talking so loudly. Now talk about maize, and you remember you are here. Those kind of things. So that kind of interaction with the people, to me, has made the Senate visible. Because, like in the past, like you're saying, most people did not understand what the Senate was doing. And then again, the bills that we have passed, for example, the Assumption of Office bill, which is now law, the president assented to it, that has given a clear guideline on what happens when a governor leaves an office and there's a new governor. You see, in the past, it was chaotic. A governor comes, when I was in Bungoma, he's very excited, he wants to take over, and then he sacks everybody, which is illegal. He sends away the CEC for finance and doesn't know that the CEC finance is the one who has the signatories at the central bank. So the government grinds to a halt. The CEC, for example, roads can disappear with graders or the tracks. There's no proper handing over. So that has been streamlined. That you see, before you leave office, you must prepare a proper handing over report. The CCs must be there for a certain period, and I'm happy that even now the proposal by the BBI also that within, if you don't have a deputy governor within a specified period, you must be able to appoint a deputy so that we don't run into a crisis like Nairobi and all those kind of things. We have also had a bill on a land index bill, which is also going to assist the county governments to raise their own revenues, because again, we are saying we don't want a situation where counties are relying on the national government for all the money. So you have to wait. Whatever they have been raising, is very little, it's minimum. They have been given only a small latitude. We have the warehouse receipt bill, which is now dealing with the post-harvest, because again, the way we have managed our post-harvest, like maize and all that has been chaotic. So there are very progressive bills that have been passed by the current Senate, and we are moving forward. We have also been very careful not to claw back the gains that we have made, in terms of devolution. And we have remained firm, even during the standoff between the two houses. We just became Solomonic and said, now the counties are suffering. You remember the story of Solomon, where the two mothers were claiming.
So you are the real mother.
We are the real mother. We say we are the real mother. If counties collapse, they are going. We thought maybe this is a trap. They want the counties to collapse, so they say now the Senate is the one that has strangled devolution. So we said no. We shall live to fight another day. For now, let us sit ground so that counties don't continue suffering.
You talked about those two bills, the number of bills that you've passed. Where do those bills originate? Do they originate from the Senate? Do they go at any point to the National Assembly?
Yes, they originate. I've talked about bills, like the two I've mentioned, they originate from the Senate. For example, the Assumption of Office bill, it had to originate from the Senate because that is our mandate to take care of the counties. There are those that originate from the Senate, then they go to the National Assembly. Unfortunately, sometimes there has been a lot of delays at the National Assembly, and that's what has brought a bit of conflict. Again, there are bills that come from the National Assembly to the Senate. Sometimes there is disagreement, and when there's disagreement, like when we disagreed on the division of revenue, we form what is called a mediation committee. Again, the mediation, we go there, and I think also that needs to be looked at, because the way it's constituted now, it's not possible sometimes to agree, because you have equal numbers, and everybody is going to pull on their own side, unless reason prevails, and
or the executive pulls some weight.
Some weight, maybe, because again there should be concurrence between the two speakers, myself and the Speaker of the National Assembly, and that's why you had the senators last year got so agitated and said there are bills that had been taken for presidential assent without the concurrence of the Senate, and that's why they went to court, and they wanted an interpretation of what should exactly happen, or a ruling, so that we don't have this kind of conflict.
I was using that question so that I can highlight the issue that we are discussing. So every bill that originates from the Senate must go to the National Assembly.
Must go to the National Assembly.
Not all bills that originate from the National Assembly must go to the Senate.
No.
Now, so this therefore means that the Senate is an appendage of the National Assembly.
It cannot be.
Because you don't have the powers to actually come up with the legislation and go through the whole entire process of making the new law and taking it to the president for assent. You must seek the concurrence of what you seem to consider to be the lower house, but what's clearly emerging here is the upper house.
No, let me temper the question, Excellency, by saying, from a layman's perspective, we take the view that when you have an upper house, that is the house that the lower house ought to be referring to.
Yeah, not the other way around.
But we seem to see the opposite happening.
Yeah, there was some mischief that happened in Naivasha.
Naivasha.
Yes, the original proposal, constitution clearly stated that the Senate was an upper house, just like other jurisdictions in the world over. In fact, you see, Kenyans, we have been very afraid of even calling. It's only in Kenya where the Speaker of the Senate is referred to as the Speaker. In all other jurisdictions, you are the President of the Senate. Even in Rwanda here, where we have...
Where they've benchmarked from us.
Yes, we have benchmarked from us. The Speaker of the Senate is referred to as the President. In fact, when I go to France, they say Mr. President. President, yes. So the mischief was... the people who are now working on the Constitution were themselves members of the National Assembly. Because there was no Senate.
Yep.
So there's no way they would have given themselves a lower position.
Yes, so they mutilated what was there, not knowing that they were going to end up in the Senate. Most of them were Tangula, Orengo, or they were in Naivasha. And are the ones who, in fact, I think Senator Wetangula had proposed that the Senate be sitting for 3 days in a week or something, or once after 2 weeks. So they end up in the Senate, and now they find themselves as senators. With some members who are in the Senate, like Kangata, at some point when they were in the National Assembly, they proposed that the Senate be abolished. Now they are members of the Senate. So sometimes when you dig a hole, don't dig a long one, because you might
find yourself in the hole.
Yeah. So I think you are right that. That needs to, and this is the conversation I have been putting anytime I have an audience. That as Kenyans, we need to be very clear what we want. Because even the conflicts that exist between the Senate and the National Assembly is because of the ambiguity that we created. We are neither, we look like a wild beast. It's neither a horse or,
let's be donkey or a cow.
Or something.
Which one is it?
So let's be clear that this is an upper house.
That's an interesting sentiment, because now if you look at the oversight rule and what we saw recently with 2 senators obviously giving their support to the governor of Nairobi in court, what was the sentiment that came out of the House, out of the Senate from that? Because for a lot of people, it was like, okay, wildebeest, horse, cow, donkey, what exactly are we doing here?
Are you oversighting or are you...
Hairy donkey. Are you oversighting or are you part of the pot, this pot that we don't understand, the food that's coming out?
I don't want to get into that so much, but it happened when we were on recess. So we've not looked at it as a whole, but we had senators commending, some saying actually maybe it's their constitutional right to to practice, others saying it will be a conflict of interest. Obviously, clearly, of course, when the matter comes to the Senate and you're the leader of majority and you are maybe representing say for example the matter comes up for impeachment and you are there, maybe the only prudent thing to do is to declare interest and have the deputy take the lead in that. So that puts you in a very awkward position, but that again we leave it to the conscience of the senators to see that whether it's right or wrong, because if they will want to participate in what goes on in the Senate, then they will have to make a clear decision on that aspect. But we obviously is an issue that needs to be looked at.
It was an eyebrow-raising one.
Yes.
So what's likely to happen when you come back? Because the issue, I see some senators have said that they'd like to raise this issue with you when you reconvene and say, look, you need to give a ruling on this and the way forward. We've seen even the president saying this is a matter of direct conflict of interest. There's even a bill on conflict of interest. Then we've seen the same senators who have been cited and MPs also saying, look, this conflict of interest story, we're going to make sure that it goes nowhere. We're going to amend it so that it suits the reality, what they consider reality.
Yeah, I think it will be looked at from the broader perspective, because we know the Parliament is not only composed of lawyers. We have engineers, we have doctors, we have all these things. So I think the whole thing maybe will be looked at, and that's where it may run into some trouble, because you may now be affecting the entire house, because people have come from the various professional backgrounds and they are only here for a contract of 5 years. They are not sure that they will come back. So it's a conversation that needs to be looked at broadly, not just focusing on maybe the lawyers who are in Parliament. But again, that's a conversation that we can have maybe later. I don't want to preempt, because if the matter is going to come to me, then I also have my own legal team that advises me on certain matters before I make certain rulings. Yes.
So we have the Speaker of the Senate, Kenneth Lusaka, in the House. He's the President of the Senate, he's told us. At 28 minutes to 8 o'clock, we are continuing the conversation, but first let's take a look at what's happening on the roads, and then we come back. We have a lot to discuss with him, of course. There is the issue of BBI, the politics that's playing its center stage in the country. Of course, it's coming also to the Parliament, both houses of Parliament. Do we need a referendum? Do we need to go through just a parliamentary way of implementing BBI? We need to hear from him on this. We also want to understand what he thinks about 2022 politics and shaping up of 2022 politics, especially in Western Kenya, where he comes from. We'll talk to him about this. Remember, you can also join the conversation. Spice FM KE on Facebook, at Spice FM KE on Twitter, and our hashtag is The Situation Room. Good morning.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Traffic.
All right, it's clear on the Eastern Bypass today as opposed to the issues that we saw there yesterday. So that's an alternate route that you can use trying to get to or away from Thika Road this morning. Still a walking nation at Kasarani Mwiki, of course, because of the road situations there. Kabasarian Avenue then leading into and out of Mudangari and then joining Wayaki Way is giving us some problems this morning. Red Hill Road also is bumper-to-bumper traffic. And, of course, it's jam-packed on Kiambu Road, bumper to bumper, trying to join Thika Road as well. Coming in traffic, is causing enormous traffic on Thika Road this morning. Dagoretti Corner to the CBD is a mess, unfortunately, and this affects everything else on Gong Road, and also now trying to join the City Mortuary roundabout. Of course, it is the hour when we see high traffic. Let's see what makes a difference shortly. But on Mombasa Road as well, all the way to the Nyayo Stadium roundabout, it's not moving in any way, but it'll ease off later on. 0719-012-600 is the number to call. Spice FM KE is our Twitter handle. Let us know what you see and keep people moving as quickly as possible.
96.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
We've spoken of a situation that, from a layman's perspective, is inversed in terms of the powers that the Senate and what we call, well, you're both National Assembly, but Parliament as we call it, and you're both Parliament, but Parliament where the members of Parliament sit and Parliament where the Senators sit. Is it possible, given the current laws that we have, for this situation to not be reversed, but to be set right?
Yeah, this is the conversation that is going on about maybe changing the constitution, looking at the constitution. That's one area that needs to be maybe addressed, to be corrected, so that it's clear that we have a parliament with two houses, the Senate as an upper house and the National Assembly as a lower house. That's not strange. It is in all jurisdictions all over the world where we have a bicameral system.
Right. What would happen in that system? What is it that would be different if we had the Senate as the actual upper house?
You find, for example, if you took the U.S. situation, you find that the vice president is actually the speaker of the Senate. So what would happen is, some of the powers, the Senate would then become a referral, kind of, just like you say, that a lot of issues that have been discussed at the lower house will then end up at the Senate for referral and concurrence. Some of the laws that would have been discussed at that lower level would then be referred to the Senate. For example, even appointment of state officers, vetting of state officers, that should be vested in the Senate. For example, I've mentioned about 10 members of Senate. 10 senators who have been members of who have been ministers. Yes. These are people. If you put Haji, Wetangula, Orengo, Ndwiga, or Chilayako as a panel that is vetting somebody wants to become a minister, they will be talking from a point of
They
knowledge.
already know.
They understanding what it is. So those, and then, for example, maybe inspector of police, as it is, I think it's only the inspector of the police who's also vetted by the Senate. The rest are done by the National Assembly. So those are some of the areas that need to be corrected, so that then the Senate has those kind of powers. Of course, I know the National Assembly, nobody wants to release
any authority, any power.
The authority. Yeah. So it will not be a walk in the park. It will be a fight. But I think we need to get sober, and if we want an effective bicameral system, then we must correct that anomaly.
So it sounds like you really support what's contained in the BBI report.
Yes, when you look at it, it balanced a lot of things. They didn't want to raise eyebrows, and that's why everybody said, okay, the report is good. Let us support it, even where it was expected that some quarters
resistance.
They said no. Let us accept the report. So I think it contained things that are progressive, and hoping that if it remains the way it was, then it's going to be a progressive document.
Remains the way it was. So we wouldn't recommend any amendments to it. Of course, the conversations that we are seeing happening now are still going back to saying, look, people want a powerful prime minister.
Who is saying?
And
let's put it correctly.
The media has declaration, for instance.
Certain individuals who have supported the idea of a strong prime minister.
That's why we're saying, that's why I asked who is saying.
And two deputies.
Who is saying that? Because you see, people with interests. And the moment we start, and that's the fear, that the moment we start creating or changing the law with certain positions in mind, certain people in mind to occupy those positions, we lose the bigger picture. We must change, or we must create positions because we think they are necessary and are going to add value. Otherwise, if you ask Mwananchi, and that's why it was not in the report that was presented, because Mwananchi feels the burden is already too heavy. Don't load more on us. And you can say you are reducing. You remember the Punguza Mzigo, whatever conversation. You may say you are reducing even you abolish the women rape or whatever, reduce the MCS, then whatever you have reduced, you are digging a hole to fill another one. Then you create more
a heavy one at the top.
And then you end up paying more money. So you need, first of all, even some of these things that we're talking about, to do an evaluation, job evaluation analysis. What is it going to cost the country if we create some of these positions? Okay, yes, there will be stability, blah, blah, but at what expense?
Right. Well, you talk about jumping the gun by, basically now starting to have these conversations and these perceptions coming to light. But of course, there's criticism of the regional meetings that we've seen taking place. Of course, there will be another meeting this weekend. Whether they are political or BBI oriented, of course, is something that is in contention. What do you think about that? About these meetings that are taking place? About whether it is shedding light on what the BBI proposes?
I think what needs to be, in my view, is not bad, but what they need to do, I think, to change the format. Because one, the biggest complaint was that even the documents are not with the people. So what are you discussing? So you need to avail copies of the report so that people are able to go through, just like the president said, kila mtu ajisome. Once they have read, I think, in my opinion, they should have gone down to smaller town hall meetings, just then to have a conversation and look at the document and let people participate. By the way, I saw even the one in Bungoma, they're going again for another one in Bohungu, is that you start with speeches. So it becomes a formal kind of meeting. Let the minister here talk, let the governors talk.
Political leadership talk.
Then, we have come by chopper, we have to go back, it's coming to rain. So the meeting must end. So Wananchi, is taken for a ride, you go there to rubber stamp. And that's why we even came up with what we call public participation bill. So even that the concept of public participation needs to be looked at very seriously, because even when I was a governor, and this happens in most of the counties, talking of public participation, do people really participate, or you bring your supporters to come and say yes?
It's choreographed.
Choreographed, and then blah, blah. So I think we need to look at it from a very serious perspective, It's a good idea that you validate what was there, check whether this is what the views that you gave. So then it's a national conversation that is going on. So it needs to be managed, I think, in a better way for better results and to avoid a bit of resistance.
And how would the task force now be involved in this?
Yeah, this is what I've been trying to think about it, because now with the task force, I don't know at what point they're going to come in, whether they're going to look at what has been put there or what is exactly going to happen.
Come back and talk to the people.
Yeah.
Would you participate in this? So there's one, of course, that's happening.
Will
in
you
your
travel
backyard.
to Western this weekend?
Are you traveling there this weekend?
I'm a referee in this matter, and the issues will be coming to Parliament, to the National Assembly and to the Senate. So I would be reluctant to actively participate at this point in time, and rather wait for the report to come. Because if I go there, I will be forced to maybe make some remarks. So obviously, I cannot be.
You'll be invited.
I'll be invited, but I've not been invited. I'll be invited to speak.
To speak to the people.
While I'm there, and as a senior member from that region and the Speaker of the Senate in the Republic of Kenya, I would not want to commit myself on issues that are going to come to my house, because then I would have already taken a position.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to remain neutral and guide the whole process so that we have a good product.
What's your opinion on the best way forward? Referendum, or we avoid the referendum and just have everything handled in Parliament?
This is my view, and I've said this, and of course there are two aspects. One, that there are people who feel Parliament can easily be compromised. There are those fears, blah blah. But again, in my own opinion, we must make up our minds. If we want to continue with the Agenda 4 that the President has put for us, the referendum way will be a dangerous route to take. Because if we recall, referendum is politics. If we recollect what happened in 2005, I remember that time I was at DC in Marakwet, chungwa and banana.
Right.
There were some areas in this country where you would not sell bananas. There were areas in this place where you would not be seen eating an orange. It became that contagious, and it became, and you remember, that took us to 2007 elections. So if we are going to go the referendum way, you can take this to the bank. The country is going to be polarized. Already you can see what's happening. We're going to be divided. The rift is there. We are going to be polarized. Those who are going to support, depending on what the questions will be. So if the question will be something that will be contagious, we will be divided, and that will be the beginning of politics until 2022. It will be difficult then to implement the Agenda 4 that the President has given us. So my view is that as much as we may, because you get the leaders you want, members of Parliament, senators were elected.
Right.
And in a representative democracy, it is assumed that my Senator Wetangula talks on behalf of me.
Of you.
He has consulted the people of Bungoma, and what he brings to the Senate is a representative of what the people of Bungoma. Whether that happens or not is a story for another day. But in representative democracy, you must trust the leaders that you have put there. And that's why, if every Mwananchi has now been consulted and everything like that, because eventually a law will have to be made. You'll have to amend those kind of things so that then it can come to Parliament, both the National Assembly and the Senate, then to just wind up. Whichever way it goes, it will end up in Parliament. So we have to make a choice.
There are those who argue that, going the referendum route is ensuring that everybody is aligned or everybody is on board in this process. This building bridges is not about leaders. It's about everybody, all Kenyans. And if all Kenyans vote on building bridges, then all Kenyans have embraced the concept of building bridges.
That is more theoretical than than practical. Because even when you go, we have participated in elections. Like I said, a lot of these things is it's more choreographed. You will get people from a region and say, let's go and support this. Let's go and support this, and it's assumed that everybody has participated. So why don't we spend less funds on? You say maybe people will be bored. Why don't you buy fewer people than buy many? Because
they're going to buy them anyway.
They're going to buy them anyway if that happens. But that's on a light note. But
in Kenya, it isn't so light.
It's real.
Yeah. So we must be careful and clear on which path we want to take, because we might end up just compromising our development agenda at the expense of politics.
Opening up the phone lines 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. A question or comment for the Senate Speaker Kenneth Lusaka, who's been with us since 7 o'clock. Of course, he's told us very many things that he thinks of how the Senate is performing. He's giving us wisdom on how the country should move forward. We have him for a couple of minutes, so you can call him now 0719-012-600. Also, post your comments on Spice FM KE Facebook. At Spice FM KE Twitter. Good morning. 13 minutes to 8 o'clock.
.9 Spice FM, Mombasa. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
It's interesting, Honorable Saka, that you talked a few minutes ago about, safeguarding the development agenda of this country. And yesterday we saw a reshuffle happen in cabinet, and we saw that perhaps there are moves now being made to safeguard this development agenda. What are your thoughts about these moves that have been made? Political, developmental?
No, of course, the prerogative of appointment of ministers, principal secretaries lies with the president.
With the president, right.
And of course, the president, in his wisdom, wants to maybe get a team that is going to deliver his agenda. And normally, when you are the captain, you look at how people are playing, and sometimes it's good to substitute,
or bench someone completely.
Bench somebody completely, substitute, remove them. Yeah, if you realizes you are good in defense, maybe moves you from, if you're not scoring, put you at the defense. So that's the position. It's his prerogative, and I think that's what he's doing to make sure he gets a team that is going to deliver for him, because really people voted for the president, the presidency, him and the deputy president, and he wants to leave a legacy, and therefore things must just work, and that's, I think, what he's trying to get at.
So we've been in limbo as a country.
Not in limbo. Just saying, maybe, when you make that kind of reshuffle, you must be having good reasons why he's adjusting his team. I don't want to think on his behalf, because he is my president, and I know he means well for the country, and that's why he's doing that, to make sure that we move forward. And the things he talked about are very key. For example, the agricultural sector. Remember, he focused so much on agriculture, because that's the backbone of our country, and many other things that he talked about that affect Mwananchi. So, I mean, for me, that is progressive.
Let's pick one or two questions, Senator. Speaker. Karaoke from Wakulima Market in Nakuru. Good morning, Karaoke.
Good morning to you. Good morning, Speaker.
Good morning to you, Karaoke.
This is for you, my dear.
Yes.
This is the question I want to ask you. I know, according to studying orders of Parliament, or rather, let me call it Senate.
Yes.
In most cases, when we want to come out with men and women who continue, and especially asking questions from within the country, and a very important question like the one that is in BBI, those men and women should go through a certain process, right?
Oh, yes.
And in this case, the 14 guys were chosen by just 2 men. The man on the hill were nominated, or rather chosen by 2 men. President Uhuru Kenyatta and, in fact, Raila Odinga, isn't it?
Yes.
I heard this other time when Chioni, who is the committee chair of the interpretation of the law, the Constitution, saying that he does not even understand how these men and women came into being. So, point number 2, the Kenyans, the way we are today, we are already overburdened. And in fact, when that team came, especially to my county here in Nakuru, they went to America Hotel, which is a 5-star hotel, where you don't expect Mwananchi to attend. And I heard Mr. Koiga and some other prominent guys talking on our behalf, and he never sent anybody there. So do you think we, as Kenyans, we contributed into whatever is in the BBI? Point number 3.
No, those are enough karaoke. Answer those two so we can pick more.
Yeah, I think he asked, let me answer karaoke. One, there are two ways in which you can raise your issues with the Senate.
Yep.
One is through your senator, you can bring a statement, or you can send it direct to the clerk and then the speaker will read it. Or two, you can do it by way of a petition. You write a petition which you can again come through your senator, or you can write it to the speaker or to clerk. I'll be able to read it. And in the case of a petition, we will look at the issues that you have raised and give it to a committee that will then look at the issues and respond back to you within 60 days. In terms of a statement, we'll also seek for an answer. Normally, I've been giving 14 days, during which time a response should have been given back to whoever has asked the statement. Now, of course, you remember that the two principals of the BBI is His Excellency the President and the former Prime Minister. And they had their own reasons why they picked the people that they picked. And I think what you are raising is important, that in terms of operationalization and public participation, what I raised earlier, that are we reaching out to many people who want to participate in this? And maybe the karaoke and others should now take this opportunity that the document is coming back to you to validate, to look at what is there. And if what you think your issues, you are not properly represented, you have an opportunity to contribute then. But I think those are lessons learned, and those are the kind of things that
we can take from
maybe
here.
we can take from there.
Sami in Magarini, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
How you doing?
Good morning.
Your question to the Senate Speaker?
Yes, one question. I would like to ask the Speaker of Senate about validation. Do we really see any sense when people gather but without the committee who are supposed actually to take down or to note down whatever issues people have to be included in the BBI, coming BBI, like the one we saw in Kisumu? There were no any committee. Was that any legitimacy? Was there any legitimacy in holding that meeting, please?
Thank you very much. Let's hear from Hussein in Nairobi. Good morning, Hussein.
Good morning. How are you guys?
We're
Fine, thank you.
Yes, my question goes to the Speaker.
Right.
Something that I've always thought about. Now, the governor and the senator comes from the same party.
Right.
They campaign together. They come together. And then you expect the senator to provide oversight. What happens when the senator actually goes missing in action? And there's no oversight whatsoever in the county.
In that county.
Because it has happened. It has happened. I don't want to mention the counties, but actually it is happening. Like total no oversight whatsoever. The governor does whatever that he wants.
Thank you very much. Good questions.
True. That's a very good. Let me start with the last question. Actually, that is true. The same questions have been raised in some counties that I know, where I find the senator and the governor from the same party, and therefore they go to bed together, and therefore nothing really goes on. What should really, and that trickles down even to the members of the county assemblies, where you may find the majority are also from the same party. And I didn't have that
Honor and privilege.
honor and privilege. I had a lot of opposition when I was the governor. The leader of majority was from the opposition, so he would propose my agenda and is the first one to shoot it down to oppose it. So it becomes very, very, very difficult to run. But I think we should have men of integrity, that oversight just remains oversight, so that they're able to put their governors on their toes, not out of malice. And that's why I've also been saying that the county assemblies, now that he raises that, the county assemblies also have a key role to play, and we've tried as a Senate to give them financial autonomy, because you can expect a situation where the county assemblies are going to inspect a project and they are being sponsored by the governor. The transport is the governor, lunch and then allowances and all that. The outcome of that kind of meeting is obvious. So they don't even have to go to the field; they just can sit down and write the report. So, but if we have autonomy, where they can be able to have their own funds and initiate the oversight process themselves, then it will make a lot of sense. And those are some of the changes those are some of the things that I would like to see. Even one day when I exit as a speaker, I would like to see some of those things really implemented, that the county assemblies are strengthened, We have built their capacity, and they are able to carry out their oversight without undue influence from the executive.
In terms of an agenda then for 2020, because we started off this year saying, okay, these are some of the things that we should see coming to probably the end of tenure of one administration in another 2 years or so, less than 2 years. Coming out of the Senate, what do you hope to see that will be established definitely this year? We can say we've moved forward.
That is one of the issues that I have been pushing so much, the autonomy, financial autonomy of the county assemblies, and then building their capacities. They have an organization called CAF. They also want it anchored in law, so that they have something that they can be, that is legal and which can be putting them together to discuss their issues. So I think those are some of the things that I will be really pushing and looking forward to having them go through the Senate. Then there was, of course, that other question that was asked about the committee not being in place, and then these meetings are taking place. So who's taking? In fact, I was reading on social media, somebody was asking the Bungoma team, so who was the secretary on what you are discussing? And nobody seemed to know. To be very clear on who took notes, who took the minutes. So this is just some chat, some conversation. So and I think that's why the committee has now been. I think the president gazetted the committee, and I think that's going to be one of the part of their roles. Maybe they will have. I don't know how they're going to operate, but I presume maybe some of them will be in some of those meetings, so they're able to guide the discussions and take people through what is there and then what can be added or subtracted.
We want to thank you very much, Senate Speaker Kenneth Lusaka, for joining us this morning. Thank you very much for all the wisdom that you've given us and told us how the Senate is working, how you'd like to see the Senate working going forward, and of course devolution. Everybody around the country seems to agree that devolution is a good thing. It was a good decision that Kenyans took and Kenyans made, but safeguarding devolution is a key role that must be played by all citizens, the county assemblies, the county executives, and now, of course, we're talking about the Senate. And the Senate will have a very, very important role to play in this. We hope that we are going to see a lot of you, the kind of rulings that you give. And I think before even you leave, we'll ask you to stay for like maybe 2 or 3 more minutes so we can take a closing round of questions. And then we say asante sana and goodbye to you. So it's coming up to 8 o'clock. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We have on the hot seat this morning Senate Speaker Kenneth Lusaka, who's been speaking to us for the entire hour. Of course, we'll take a few final round of questions. You'll answer a question from Samuel Magarini, who was talking about the committee and whether having those meetings. I think you've answered it in many ways. The role of the committee in spearheading the ongoing conversations about BBI. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Remember, we're live streaming on Facebook, Spice FM KE, and on Twitter as well, Spice FM KE. And you can join the conversation as well by streaming live on YouTube, Spice FM KE. And our website is www.spicefm.co.ke. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
Spice up your life. 102.5 Spice FM, Kisumu. Traffic.
Taking a look at Ngong Road all the way from Racecourse down to town, traffic is thick and absolutely nothing to smile about right now. It's quite chock-a-blocked, and it's going to take us that way to the City Mortuary roundabout, trying to head down Ngong Road all the way to Uhuru Highway. So that is quite the situation. Wayaki Way and the road passing Kianda School is a parking lot. Traffic this last week has definitely been crazy. Of course, the showers this morning compounded the issue. One big parking lot on Langata Road as well, all the way from KWS to the T-Mall roundabout. And there is an issue with the SGR this morning. Unfortunately, that did not run either. Langata Road traffic is terrible as well. So everywhere you look, definitely a traffic situation. That trying to say that we need to sit tight while that happens, and we'll see what happens in a short while. But for now, be patient, approach with caution, and take an alternate route of the bypasses where you can. Spice FM KE 0719 012 600. Let us know what you see, and we'll share that info as best we can.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
2 minutes after 8 o'clock, this is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We have on the hot seat since 7 o'clock the Senate Speaker, Kenneth Lusaka.
If I were to ask a utopian question, what law would you, utopianly speaking, want to see changed so that the Senate actually has the sort of powers it ought to have in overseeing not just the work that the lower house does, but what the governors also do?
I think we need to, we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
No.
We just need to look at the best practices in the world where we have a bicameral system like France, like the US, Australia, South Africa. So we need the law that will really clearly set out the roles, so that this is an upper house and this is a lower house. And then, come up also with responsibilities, just like the Constitution says, in Article 96, and, we have clearly stipulated roles of the Senate, and like I said, it becomes a referral house where matters that come from the lower house would then go to the Senate for to digest and either concurrence or streamlining, and then it becomes before it's ascended by the president.
If I hear you correctly, this process has begun.
Yeah, we have. We made we gave our recommendations to the BBI, and we are hoping that why it was not prominently brought out, I think, was because the chair and the deputy were all from the Senate, and the fear was that
it looked like
I'm going there to push the agenda. But I think somehow along the way, it will be brought on board.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So, of course, we were talking about the issues of how the counties are operating. There is the question of what it means to not access office. This has gone to court. The court has actually said this, that once you're charged here, you should not access office. It was brought to the Senate. You were not in, so your deputy gave some, not a ruling, but some insights into this, and where he was talking about basically the office is the physical space. Do you agree with that?
I agree with the ruling because, you see, ideally, I would have been the one making that, reading the judgment, because, you see, as my deputy, the Speaker's office is an office. So that's a position that we hold. And, of course, the conversation is also going on. Like, it is a whole concept that we need to look at. Somebody who has been elected by, say, 1 million people, you are innocent until proved guilty. Then, maybe 3 people sit to decide to remove you in office. The case can drag on for as long as it goes. So
the entire
tenure of your office. Yeah. So are we not shortchanging 1 million people who voted for this person to go to the office? Supposing it turns out that you are innocent and you have been out for the entire period, what happens? Are they going to compensate this kind of person for the time he has been out and the trauma that he's gone through and all that manner of things? So I think we really need to, as much as we are saying, of course, everybody is joining in the war against corruption and to be tough on that. But we must also be careful not to interfere with the rights and of people, and also to interfere with the rights of people who have made a decision that this is, if for example, voting, democracy is, if you are being voted by thieves, then you know you are the best thief and you are their
You're the
representative.
best thief,
You are the best thief. If you are being voted by Manambas, the majority are Manambas. They vote for you and you are their representative. That's the cost of democracy. So we must live with it. And in my view, I know this is a conversation that is going on. Even it will come to Senate, and people have been wondering because it started with they started with the governors. It may go to members of parliament, members of the National Assembly. What happens now when a member of parliament says arraigned in court, and he's told not to step aside? What happens to the people who have voted for him? So it's something that needs to be looked at. I know the judiciary was also trying to assert themselves, say because they have been bashed enough times, like you are the weakest link in this war. The weakest link in the war against corruption. But I think that's something that we really need to look at so that we don't end up shortchanging Mwananchi.
What would you do? I mean, if you are the one to actually make this ruling, if it was said that this matter shall be decided by the Speaker of the Senate.
Like I said, you are presumed to be innocent until proved guilty. Remember.
So you continue serving.
Yes,
even though you've been charged for abusing that office that people put you in.
So
those Manambas or those thieves, they picked you and they told you go and serve us.
Yeah.
But they did not tell you go and steal.
But these are still allegations, remember.
Yes.
They have not been proven. These are still allegations until the whole judicial process is over. And even if you are, say, in the High Court, you will have a right of appeal. You'll go to the Court of Appeal. They'll go to Supreme Court. So until the whole and that is what fairness is all about. So until the whole process is completed, how do you just judge this guy? And it's the whole process, like I said, could drag on for as long as your term. So I think I would say, like we say, you are presumed to be innocent until proven guilty.
We want to thank you then very much for coming. Asante sana. You've concluded all our questions. Not all of them. We'll invite you again to come.
Anytime. I'm available. I'm one person who believes in I'm easily accessible. I believe in talking to people because then you clarify a lot of things.
Right.
Because when you don't talk about some of these things, people live with misinformation and they make conclusions that are not based on any facts. So I will always be available anytime you want me to come around.
You said from here you'll be traveling to Mararal.
Yes,
right,
we're going to launch the strategic. I'm the guest of honor at the launch of the strategic plan, and I've been also availing myself to the counties anytime they have this official business to do. I always avail myself because the Senate is the bigger brother of the county assembly, so we must support them.
We must hold their hands.
We must hold their hands until they work properly.
When you get to that region, you'll find us, of course, on 96.0. That's our Nakuru frequency.
Okay.
And then you may also be able to get us.
What is the frequency for Bungoma?
The frequency for Western Kenya, you'll be able to catch us on 96.7 in Eldoret or from the Kisumu one on 102.5. So you'll be able to capture from one of those, whichever is closer. In fact, we'll get feedback from you on which one is stronger.
It's clearer for you.
But also remember, we live stream the show. So on Facebook, on our website, on YouTube, on Twitter, we live stream the show.
So the entire world knows that I'm saying the Senate should be an upper house.
Yes. The whole world has heard you today. The world has heard what you've got to say.
Thank you very much, Speaker.
Thank you so much.
We wish you a good day.
Thank you so much.
Asante sana. This is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. It's now 10 minutes past 8.